Welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad. Today I'm going to be reviewing Shrinking Season 2 on Apple TV Plus. I was a big fan of the show in the first season, so I was really excited for Season 2, and it has flown by. The finale just launched last night and really wrapped everything up for the second season. And while I am still very positive on Season 2, I think this season was a little bit more rough around the edges than the first season. It kind of reminds me of Bill Lawrence's other Apple TV Plus show, which is Ted Lasso. Of course, a very similar sort of vibe and theme, but also in terms of how the seasons develop throughout. The first season of Ted Lasso is very tightly scripted, kind of rock solid, loved it. And then the second season, you start to see a little bit more of the cracks as they try and expand the story a little bit more. I felt like this same thing happened with Shrinking. I felt like they needed, or they felt that they needed to go bigger in the second season and really expand on every character, which I enjoyed. But something that was great about the first season was a lot of these characters, their stories kind of interweaved throughout. And so you saw all these twists and turns, and all of their stories were a little bit more related. And so then in the end, everything kind of falls into place. Whereas in this second season, it felt like everything was a lot more siloed. Each character was doing something with a different character, but the leads kind of separated out. But what ends up happening is that a lot of these storylines feel a little bit rushed because it felt like maybe they had to fit so much in that they didn't feel they had the time. The two ones that I'm going to point out specifically are Sean's storyline with his dad, which is pretty early on in the season. His dad comes back into his life, and you find out that his dad was very dismissive of his feelings when he came back from the war and kind of blew him off. And so that kind of blows up in one episode, and then they resolve it in the next episode, and that's kind of it. You don't really hear much about that storyline the rest of the season. Sean seems to be fine. And that's kind of it. And this is a recurring thing that happens in most of the plot lines throughout the season. The other big one is between Liz and Derek. I will point out that one highlight is Derek in this season is excellent. I really like that they expanded on his character and made him a little bit more relatable and less of just a wisecracking guy, right? But obviously, the big storyline is that Liz cheats on Derek by kissing an old flame, and you know that happens in one episode. And I thought this was going to be like a season long thing where in the end they finally resolve it and they're pushing through it. But no, it's like the next episode, very next episode, they resolve it, and then they're kind of fine the rest of the season, which I feel like I don't need realism in my shows. This is a very unrealistic show, but a little bit more time to kind of work through that storyline would have benefited the story, and I think it would have been more satisfying for the audience if they did that. Another storyline that I felt wasn't super satisfying was the introduction of Lewis as the drunk driver who killed Tia before the kind of the genesis of the show, who's played by Brett Goldstein. I think he does a great job, and of course, he's an executive producer on the show. But ultimately, I felt like this storyline just wasn't developed quite enough. And it's kind of the pivotal moment of the final episode. And so when we don't get enough backstory to really set that up, it doesn't hit as well as it could have. We get a brief little flashback of Lewis in one of the mid-season episodes, but it's probably about 10 minutes, and you see his life leading up to the crash and then kind of slightly after, and that's kind of it. But I felt like they could have expanded on that a little bit more and really dove into his character and psyche and how he reacted, and maybe elaborate a little bit more on his character, because as we got his backstory, and then it kind of flatlines a little bit, and then we hit the finale, and it's this supposed to be this big moment. I also felt like there was a really weird moment in that finale where his friend just walks up to him, is like, "You can't come to Thanksgiving. My friends found out you murdered somebody." It's like, okay, guy, it's a little bit intense, right? Like, I understand the general thought of maybe I don't want to hang out with you because of your past, but the line just stuck out as really strange to me, the way that he said it. But I digress. Overall, I was still really positive on this season. I don't want to get super negative and get hung up on that, because while some of these storylines felt a little bit unsatisfying, a lot of them did feel satisfying. I think the biggest one is Paul throughout this season. Harrison Ford is just so good in this show, And he gives a monologue in the finale that like won't leave a dry eye in your living room. He is giving one of the best performances I've seen him do in many years, maybe of his entire career. He's just never played this type of role, and I think he's excellent in it. Jason Segel is also awesome. He has a brief little moment with his co-star from How I Met Your Mother as well, which is a nice little Easter egg. But he delivers some great moments. He has a mental breakdown, his conversation with Alice, a lot of big moments where he's really showing true emotion. And he does a really good job with facial acting as well. And so he gives us a lot of emotional moments and funny moments just with like how he's looking into the camera or looking at a different character, which I think is great. I think that's one of his highlights as an actor. And so overall, I think those are kind of the highlights. Derek was a highlight, Paul was a highlight, and then Jimmy, uh, kind of love him or hate him, but I think he's kind of the beating heart of this show, and I think Jason Segel plays him excellently. So that's going to probably wrap it up for my thoughts on this season. If you've got any thoughts, anything you really enjoyed or maybe you didn't love so much from the season, just drop them in the comments below. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you want to hear more about TV and movies. And until then, we'll see you guys in the next video.